I'm in Gunnison, Colorado at the Pioneer Museum. It's $15 for admission, and they got a bunch of old historical buildings and cool stuff like the train behind me. So let's walk around and check it out.
We'll start inside the kind of welcome area of the museum. I think if you're from out of town, it's a good place to start. It gives you a history of Gunnison and the county and even the state. So there's a lot of interesting things to see in here. It's just, obviously there's a lot of things from, historical artifacts. There's a lot of arrowheads there on the wall. I love that old picture of Gunnison High School football team from the 20s and that picture there from the town in the 1880s. As we head outside to where all the buildings are, we're going to first come upon the little monument for John Gunnison, the town was named after because he was an early explorer that helped survey the area for railroad. And the railroad is a big part of the display here at the Pioneer Museum. It was very important to the town. And this engine, this was Cinderella, and it was built in 1882. There's only 3 of 150 of those that were made that still exist. The water tank here, you see a lot of those in these towns. Instead of water towers, you see more of the water tanks. And I'm not being from here, not sure why that would be. But in Kansas, where I'm from, you see more of the water towers, and I've seen more of the water tanks in this part of the country. And they have a lot of interesting displays. This was a railroad depot from Sargent's, Colorado, which was a brief, few seconds of a video I did earlier here on US 50. And so they moved the depot here. Wasn't needed there anymore. It's not quite a ghost town, but unincorporated community of Sargent. And so, there's all kinds of stuff within here about the railroad. And Gunnison's got about 6,000 people. The railroad was huge as to why it grew. There was mining here, and then the cattle industry became significant. But there's things from all over different parts of Colorado that have kind of come together in this museum, and they've done a really nice job. And as you can see, there's all kinds of stuff to walk around and check out.
This is a little different than some of the other Pioneer museums I've been to. It's really good. But the one thing is different is that you'll go into you go into a railroad train car, and they have a display about the agricultural history, or a little video playing about Gunnison. So it's not like just the historical object, or the building. They'll have something else inside of it maybe. In this one, this is the train station, but there's all kinds of stuff inside here. Obviously mostly related to the railroad. So pretty interesting.
We'll get back to some pioneering things here in a minute, but also on this museum grounds are things like this. This is the Antique Car Museum. There are 90 different antique cars throughout the building. So even if you're not interested into the pioneering history, there's something kind of for everybody to bring a family to this area. So there's a lot of cool old cars, certainly some that dating way back into the early 1900s. And then right next to it, you have a Coors building. And obviously Coors is from Colorado, and it made me chuckle when I walked in and saw all of the things that are dedicated to Coors beer, but pretty interesting to look at. As we head back around to check out some of the historic buildings, a lot of these buildings are authentic buildings that have, displays put inside of them. This one has all kinds of sewing machines and kind of household items, kind of a history of those things, which is it's interesting. I'm not sure how it all relates to the, Gunnison or the area, but probably does. I'm not obviously from there, so interesting to check that out. I love seeing the kind of history of an evolution of transportation. You see some of these stages and different ways they got around in the early days of, not only Gunnison, but all around the country. And there's a really well done display of all that. This is an old cabin built in 1879, and it had different uses, and now they've turned it into what a chapel would have been like. And I like to look in these buildings and think about what life was like back then, and they help recreate a little bit of what that might have been like. This was the first ever post office in Gunnison County, built in the 1870s. So it was originally on a ranch south of town, and a lot of the old post offices, they were basically on a farmer's property, and the farmer was the postmaster. Neat to see the original building. One of my favorite buildings here is the old school. It was designed to look like a tugboat and a lighthouse, and it was built in 1905, the Paragon Rural School. And really creative architecture, obviously, and I think that's fascinating how, you know, places like this were built by an individual that had a great idea. Architect's name was John Outcott, and he was a ship designer out east and then designed the school. This was built for $1,900 in 1905 and was used until around 1950. Another school on the grounds here is the Doyleville School. And if you watched one of my earlier videos, it was another small town that I went through, and there was really not much left of Doyleville today. But it once had a community, and this school was what served the young people of that community. Very interesting map here on the wall is an 1880 map showing the wagon roads of the area. Really cool. The next museum building is the military building. And there's a lot of buildings that are on the grounds here that I'm not showing you. I'm just showing you a few of my favorites. There's a lot more. I could show you tons of different places, but this military building is really interesting and has a lot of interesting displays that you might not see in too many places when you're looking for, you know, pioneering type stuff. A lot of the old guns and uniforms and a bunch of newspaper clippings. Very thorough museum. And if you're into military history, which, you know, is a big part of our country's history, then this would be certainly a building you would want to check out. It's like I said, very thorough. Got all kinds of stuff from, I'd say a lot of World War II stuff, but I think other ones as well. But appeared to me a lot of World War II stuff in that building. The museum is basically open in the summer every day, 9 to 5. They have a really good website that talks about a lot of these buildings, and you should check it out if you're planning on visiting. There is a small cost, but well worth it to see things like another old post office right here. But definitely a great place to spend the day.
Well, this is the end of the train cars, so that'd be an appropriate place to conclude this video. Pretty impressive. You know, I've been to a couple other places like this. I went to one in Nebraska and Wichita, Kansas, where I live. And this one's kind of in between the two. The one in Nebraska just had like an unbelievable amount of things to see. And the one in Wichita was more just about all the historic buildings from the 1860s, 1880s. This one's kind of a mixture. This has some old historic buildings and then some newer ones, and then lots of stuff. So you could easily spend hours just checking things out, but definitely a cool place to visit here in Gunnison. It talks all about the history of places all around this area, not just Gunnison, but the other kind of ghost towns in the area, and then the county, and then places from all around the country. Definitely worth a stop if you're ever near Gunnison, Colorado.